Hello, I'm James Toy, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for KCRAR. You're about to watch one of our candidate interviews, an unfiltered, front row look at how those seeking office approach the issues that shape private property rights and the real estate industry as a whole. We share these conversations publicly so you can hear directly from the candidates, understand their positions in their words, and cast your vote with confidence.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'm James Toy. I'm the Government Affairs Senior Vice President here at KCRAR. We are a trade association of about 13,000 members across both Kansas and Missouri. We operate in about 45, 46 counties, so certainly a pretty wide geography and certainly interested in what's happening in the city of Raymore. But I'd love to hear a little bit about you. If you can tell me a bit about maybe your professional career, your experience with the city, I'd love to hear it.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to interview with your organization. Yeah. As it says, Reginald Townsend, I've been a member or resident of Raymore for about 16 years now. What got me to Raymore was the Marine Corps. I was on active duty when I was transferred here in 2010 and retired about 2 years into that tour duty after 22 years in the Marine Corps. Enjoyed the area. Our daughters, were my oldest daughter was in middle school and she was going to be starting high school right around the time I retired or was due to have orders to transfer to a new duty station. And I didn't want to be a geographical bachelor. That was an option. Didn't want to have our oldest, changing, high schools mid, term. And we enjoyed the area, so we just decided to stay here. After that, retiring, I became a contractor for the Marine Corps. And then matriculated into current day. I'm a federal employee for the Marine Corps in their financial management as a financial management analyst with the Resources, Finance, and Fiscals Department. With the city of Raymore, I became a city council member back in 2017. After several years of just being in the community, really enjoyed what the city was doing. It wasn't a typical the city's doing something wrong and I want to jump on and change it. It was one of those, I really liked what the city had been doing up until that point in my time with the community. And I just want to be a part of that. Just want to give my perspective on, what growth looks like, my perspective on community, what I've experienced in my career, traveling the world and traveling the nation. And then just sharing that and just being a individual that's just puts my hand in it and just get going at it. That became I got assigned to the Total Transportation Policy Committee for MARC, Mid-America Regional Council, partly because one of my campaign agenda items was the I-49 freeway through Raymore and Belton communities, bottlenecks down to 2 lanes from 3 lanes in both directions at about the 155th area street, which is county line. That creates a, somewhat of a commuter congestion choke point for us because, just about half of the county population is between Raymore and Belton. And so as the morning and evening traffic, begins to commence, obviously there's a backup. And so that was a concern I had and just wanted to find ways to improve that. And my continual asking staff and the mayor, how are we doing about that? He's like, well, there's a position open on the TTPC committee. How about you join that? So that kind of got me immersed into the transportation and infrastructure world, as a Cass County liaison on that committee. And then shortly thereafter, I was appointed, asked to serve on the Kansas City Transportation Authority's board. A position became available on there for the Cass County representative and went through the county nomination to the governor. The governor made a nomination which required Senate confirmation. So I had to go through confirmation hearings down in Jeff City and was appointed in February of 2021, I believe it was. So I'm in one of my fifth year with that organization. And that really has exposed, my eyes and experience to the regional role, that Raymore has, and how our community connects with the region, the broader concerns, how to access our community is an issue for me, just because I-49 is the main corridor. And we have received funding and approval for that I-49 project. So when that construction starts, it's going to be real evident. There's only one way in and one way out when you're trying to find a detour around that traffic. Some of the alternative routes are kind of what I call paved country roads that are very narrow and doesn't necessarily have a comfortable traversing between two cars passing each other, because any little movement left or right and you're pretty much kissing side mirrors. Still some challenges there, trying to find ways to improve access into our community. But like I said, over the years, I've really enjoyed my time on the council. We've done some pretty good things, some pretty cool things that have really advanced and elevated the region and elevated the community to where our home prices and home values are greatly increased from what they were when I joined the council. All the while, at the same time, we didn't raise taxes. The property taxes, the levy has been the same the entire time, even when there's an opportunity under the Hancock Amendment that we could have, raised it up to the ceiling and not been in violation. And we felt that was not necessary because of the valuation that our community has. We were able to provide the same level of service and more with regard to how that was. So that's who I am. Have two daughters. I've been married for 30. Don't quote me. My wife is going to be mad at me. 33 years here this coming June. She's my high school sweetheart. We have two adult daughters now. One is currently in college at KCRAR Institute, and our oldest, she is a program manager with the Missouri Energy Commission, not for profit over there. So it's a little bit about myself. Deacon at my local church. Active in the community there, as well as on our community Raymore Peculiar Optimist Club, which is a youth organization. I'm a member of that group as well.
Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. I think it's safe to say you're probably not a bored guy. It sounds like you got a lot going on.
Yeah. I didn't. I just remembered. I recently was just appointed to the an international association, the American Public Transportation Association, or as they call it, APTA. It's about a 1,300 member organization that represents the transit agencies and transit providers and transit industry individuals, both in North America, Canada, and international organizations. So I'm on their board of directors and executive board, as well as on their transit board member subcommittee, executive committee, which is the committee that helps advocate and legislate and give education to transit board members around the nation. So yeah, I'm a little busy, a little bit.
I think that's safe to say. And, there's a couple of things that you just mentioned that really caught my attention. One is, we talked to a number of candidates, and I would say 99% have a very similar backstory. They saw an issue with their city and their county, so they decided to get involved. But
Yeah.
you don't fall into that camp. You just were called to public service. You wanted to continue to better the city.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I couldn't find fault with anything that I was seeing. Naturally, no one's perfect. No community is perfect. No city is perfect. No municipality or governmental entity is perfect, because it is the inevitable government. So there's always going to be some likes and dislikes. I would have done it differently, or you can't please everybody. There's political affiliations and opinions, and just the proverbial, I would love to not have to pay taxes, but we don't subscribe to the police department. We don't subscribe to the fire department. It's not a subscription service. So we have to find a way to, cover those services as we provide for our community. And the medium to do that is taxes. It's just the unfortunate reality of our environment. So I didn't find fault. It was literally, like I said, I just wanted to be a part of the process, lend my advice and experience, how we can better the community.
Well, very much appreciate that answer. And I very much enjoy the subscription service analogy. I might steal that from you if that's okay. I'm going to tuck that
no,
away.
that's fine. Yeah. Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
really
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So prior to coming to the Kansas Realtors, I had previously worked for a county in Florida, and I worked a lot with FDOT's Florida Department of Transportation regional districts. So it caught my attention that you had talked about that a little bit. As far as the city of Raymore itself, because I think it's great that you have that regional view. I think it's important to
Yeah,
keep that in mind as the city is planning out their own infrastructure needs. But
yeah.
specifically in your backyard, what are
Mhm.
the greatest needs? I'm sure, like most municipalities in the region, you're seeing growth, you're seeing businesses want to come in, you're seeing new residents go into your marketplace. How do you
Yeah.
keep up with that pace of growth?
Yeah, that's a challenging aspect for us because there's in business, location, right? So they always want to be where there's the most amount of visibility for their business, the most traffic or foot traffic, those two kind of metrics. And so for us, that's kind of the Highway 58, Dean intersection. That is where the entrance to our community off of I-49. And so we have a lot of businesses, it's not a negative, trying to shoehorn into some slots that not necessarily where we would like them to be. We said, well, there's some other alternative locations a little further down that roadway that we think you would still benefit, but it also stretch, that traffic and that, movement through the city a little further along that particular highway. So for me, it's the challenging part of making those other portions of our city more attractive to development. And that comes with where and how we place certain types of housing, where and how our infrastructure is built out to allow them, whether it's our investment as a community to expand the roadway or as a part of the discussion with the developer is, well, as a community benefit and a community negotiation. Well, if you would, if you're keen on a particular portion of our community, how about fund, the infrastructure build out, as far as the roadway, or the some other utility type things that may be necessary. For me, that's one of the more critical pieces because, as I said earlier, with regard to I-49, as our community grows, especially to our northern perimeter and towards our eastern perimeter, northeastern perimeters, the access into our city is tight. It's very challenged. There are small arterial roads, and we're building investments, and the developers are investing in that part of town. And the roadways to those communities are not in our jurisdiction. They're a neighboring city, they're in a neighboring county. And so it really takes that regional partnership that says, hey, you know, it's kind of hard to say if build a road in your community where you don't have residents, but it would benefit us. It's kind of hard to have someone write a check to do that, when it says, why would I do that? But if we, frame that conversation in a way, I think it would create an opportunity for investment and development in that part of your region because we are doing it on our side of the street. So that creates some comparable housing market for a more dormant portion of land in your jurisdiction, so it could spur some growth, so it's those types of conversations that I've learned to kind of, how to frame that conversation of, well, that's my, backyard, if you will. I don't have any reason to invest over there. Well, really you do, because we're investing so many millions of dollars, or developers are investing so many millions of dollars in a new housing development. That would spur some opportunities on that part of your community that create some a new tax base because it's a new housing community, as well as an infrastructure that could benefit both of us.
No, very well said. And to your point, I think regionalism is the necessary approach in this day and age. If you look at our road networks, our transportation systems, it is increasingly interconnected. One
Yes.
city could have theirs all squared away, the highest grade of roadways, but
Yep.
your neighboring city, which connects right and feeds right into most of your major roads and arterial roadways, if they're
Yep.
not up to par, that impacts your entire community. So I
Yep.
know exactly what you're saying there. I am curious, though. We talked a little bit about development coming into your area. And
Yep.
of course, with development, with commercial and business, that comes
Yep.
additional employees and greater housing needs. Do you have any
Mhm.
strategies in mind to address growing needs and particularly for attainable housing?
Yes. So for our community, we've done I would say we've done an awesome job of creating some additional housing options. That was one of the things that we were pretty much deficient in. We are kind of how we frame ourselves. We're a hybrid community. We're a hybrid bedroom community / suburban community. Our city has grown. We're about 75% owner occupied, 25% rental, maybe 80-20, depending on the time of day you do the count. But we have a lot of development that are kind of zoned and approved for additional single family homes. And like I said before, as our community has appreciated in value, the median home price has also appreciated in median value. So we've kind of created a attainable housing challenge for ourselves in how we've made investments. We've added 3 additional new luxury apartment communities that are comparable to market rate, that are comparable to our median house price points. And so the challenge is, where and how do we create opportunities for investors and developers to build attainable houses that are within the standards of our community? One of the things that I've always advocated for, and says, we've gone through several community developer involved and included unified code reviews, to where we've brought in developers to our economic development department, our community development department, and sit down and reviewed our codes and says, here's where we want to improve our minimum standards. And so when we make these improvements to our minimum standards to raise the minimum, what does that mean to you as a developer? How much of a cost is that causing you? Because we don't want to price ourselves out in raising our minimum, but we also want to make sure that we are true to our standard. Our standards have raised. We want to make sure our minimum is raised as well. And so we've done that. More recently, we've also done an additional review of our unified code and done what we call a anti-monotony, code review and policy, so that we can make sure new development is brought in to where, if you have a porch, it's an actual usable porch, not a decorative, like my porch. I pretty much have a delivery box, a little plant, but I can't see the chair out there. If I did, you can't open the front door. It's very aesthetically pleasing, but it's not usable. So little things like that, or the front foyer, the landscaping, certain types of shrubbery and spacing and treescape, some of the facades and setbacks of doors and garages, little things like that, that we have done within our unified code to make sure that we aren't creating cookie cutter communities, but also at the same time, make sure our standards are adhered to in a way that can create whatever that new starter home is, whatever that new starter home price is, because it's unrealistic to assume that what the starter home price was 20 years ago is not the same starter home price today. And so we just have to make sure that whatever that new median rate is we have the codes that make sure it's doable in our community and attainable for those who wants to live in our community. Because I've also seen where it's not just the new home buyer, it's also those who are downsizing. And so I'm also interested in making sure that we have the opportunity for our longtime residents who's been with us for 20 or 30 years, the opportunity to age in place. For those newer residents that are coming in, they can age in place. And those that have been here for a long time want to downsize into something that's more physically accommodating for them as they get older in life.
Well, it certainly sounds like the city is trying to take a proactive approach, and I will admittedly tell you that I believe that attainable housing is one of the most difficult issues to tackle. It is an incredibly subjective term, and each municipality, each marketplace, I mean, that definition is going to vary, and you're constantly moving the goalpost, even in your own backyard, year over year. I mean, what's attainable one year could be completely different the next. So I appreciate that you guys are taking a look at that. And I also really appreciate that you guys are working with developers. I think that's wise to bring them to the table. Certainly, they by and large want to be good partners to the community, to the municipal government. So I think that's very great. I am curious, could you speak to a little bit about your background and how you think that impacts your leadership style? Certainly your professional career, your private life, it all feeds into how you govern. Could you speak to how maybe that impacts you?
Yes, definitely. I'm feeling the brunt of that now because part of some of the narrative that's out there within the campaign trail, if you will, is I'm flip-flopping on my positions for past approval of multifamily and the incentives that were utilized to allow those multifamilies to be kind of built out in our community. And part of that is one, in education. The communities that we've invested in with multifamily and developers have built out new luxury apartments. All of that growth and all those activities were born out of community input. We were very intentional in including our residents in the decisions we made and the types of opportunities that we presented for our community. We called those events community conversations. And those were curated or moderated, use a more appropriate term, by University of Kansas, and where we brought in, on average, 200 to 300 residents, and went through and walked through different. What do you want to see in Raymore? What are your priorities for Raymore, from housing to entertainment, infrastructure? It went the full gamut. Went through those statistical analysis and review and deep dive into those things. And that was over a series of years. So between 2016, I, as a resident, attended my first one. And then at 2018, as an actual city council member, 2021, 22 was our latest. And I think the last version of it was more of a survey, which we submitted, which was in 23. All those community conversations led into the initiatives that allowed us to create some incentivization for different developers, which part of that required more increased amenities, better finishes, so that way, if we're going to incentivize you for your project, that means you have to come with a better quality of a product for our community to be able to accept that. And so that created an environment where we were creating more multifamily than necessary. It was changing the character of our community, where it didn't, because we don't have apartments. The only other apartment we had is which is the Ridgeway Apartments, that are an older housing assistance community. They're nice, don't get me wrong. And then we have our Edgemore Apartments, whereas I think those were built in the 90s. So both of those two communities were built in the 90s. And when you look at our more regional neighborhoods around us, they have newer apartments. So we didn't have any options for those who are looking for newer amenities, newer finishes, some more up-to-date, types of finishes within their apartment units. So this gave us an opportunity to create some housing options for our residents. And so now today, the challenge is, well, we've created these apartments and options for residents, which also created options for the new industrial warehouses and new employers we have in town. A lot of those, are residents of those new units. A lot of our funny thing is, one of the teachers literally walks to school now because it's across the lawn, basically. I learned that she just walks to school, which is saving her, an enormous amount of money, because there's no vehicle necessary, or she has a vehicle. I believe it's a she. That's a huge assumption on my part. But they, ride. They just literally walk to work, so that vehicle expense is greatly reduced. And so there's a whole host of examples. I've even learned from one of the council members that one of their constituencies confided in them. They were against the apartments before, but then when they realized that their kids were moving in and their grandkids were closer, they were now 15 minutes away versus an hour away. They're all for them, So it was those, wins that we were sharing, and we were telling those community that there is value in this. It creates new customers. It creates new opportunities for those who are in those housing options to now become a loyal fan of Raymore. When they were temporarily here, say, I'm here for work, but I really want to live in Overland Park. Now all of a sudden they realize, my radius now buying a house is just Raymore. So it's that type of, look and feel that, we want our community to have, and what those housing options provide. And so now going forward, I don't believe, and even if you look at our Blueprint 2045, which is our long range, growth plan, we're pretty much built out for apartments. There is no vision, maybe with a small few pockets, because of the mixed use aspect that we're trying to go for some more entertainment and retail. Those are better suited for that mixed use type of development. But the preponderance of the city is more single family communities. And so it's those areas where how do we create an environment where it's more attainable housing options that are in those spaces? What do those look like? Are those on slab type units that are they more townhome type ownership? What is that market now in today's marketplace? And what does that mean? So that's one of the challenges going forward in the leadership. Should I be reelected or elected back to the council? Is how do we navigate the next era of Raymore's housing options, and what do those look like? What's the price point? What is our median price point now? What is our housing stock going to be going forward, and where? Because we can't force a landowner. We need you to make housing development. It's one of those. It's the family farm, and when generations, and that's how Raymore became Raymore. Generations turned over, and the next generation says, "I don't want to be a farmer anymore." This is now we're going to sell the land and create developments. That's what my development used to be. It used to be farmland, and back in 2004, timber trails became to be. So that's how Raymore has grown to be what it is. The family farms has matured into a community of homes and businesses, and we honor and respect the legacy of those families because street names are after them. And so going forward, very similar attributes that I look to carry if I'm elected, to still honor, to honor the land use rights of those property owners, but at the same time, making sure that the development that are being contemplated for those areas fit within what Raymore had planned as we grow.
No, very much appreciate that answer. And it's very much a balancing act. It's something we see nationally is trying to balance ag land versus residential because we're starting to see less and less productivity on those lands. You're seeing generational farmers sell to developers because they're no longer interested in being in the business. So it sounds like Raymore is certainly no exception to that rule. So I'm very curious to watch as that develops. And it sounds like you guys have a very big task at hand as you're continuing to figure out how do you bolster your single family housing stock. And I will say from a realtor association perspective, certainly, our chief focus is on single family, but there is a place for multifamily. There's a degree of density that you will never capture with single family. And while I think there's options such as ADUs on site that can be used as second residences, and there's other options and zoning you can explore, multifamily does serve a purpose. Is any of the multifamily or apartment communities in Raymore currently slated for attainable housing, or is it more luxury or market rate?
No, our units, the only, when you say attainable, meaning they have the option for we do have light tech community developments. We recently approved and they're now built out and occupied. They have occupancy. And I can see them from my front door. The Ridgeway apartments and townhomes. We also have under development a LIHTC community behind our West Central Community Action Committee, which is a LIHTC, senior living and veteran supported community. Then we have another, I don't believe it's LIHTC, but I think it has the housing and urban development opportunities there. But for the most part, all of our multifamily units are just market rate units that we have, especially the newer ones are all market rate multifamily units.
Sure. Appreciate you letting me know. And it sounds like if you have that many marketplace coming into Raymore, there's certainly the demand there. So I have one final question for you. I know I've taken up a little bit of your time, so I very much appreciate great responses. We have a number of realtors in the area, and particularly in Raymore. When they go to the polls on April 7th, what is your message to them? Why should they cast their ballot for you?
Yeah. Well, I am all for. I'm a family man. I enjoy seeing families thriving in the community. I enjoy new residents and existing residents thriving where they live. And I would hope that when they cast their vote on April 7th, they are casting their vote for someone who knows that we are a growing community and we're going to welcome any and everyone who wants to make Raymore home. When I moved here, it was an eye opener having literally my neighbors coming knocking on the doors and bringing over baskets of cookies. I've seen that in the movies. I've never seen that in real life. And so we were like, okay, this is weird. And then more recently, as our kids have aged out and our neighbors, we all had, school-aged kids, and now they're all grown and getting married. And the new residents who are now have younger kids, it warmed my heart till when I now see bicycles piled up in the front yard because the kids are all gathering in the backyard playing. They're now out. I hear the kids, laughter. I see families walking, either single people walking with their pets or older people out getting their exercise. It's that sense of community that Raymore has. Whether you live in a multifamily or whether you live in a single family, we all have a vested interest in the growth and opportunities here. And I would hope the realtors see that in me as an opportunity to continue to advocate for anyone to come to Raymore and find it and call it home, because it is a great place to live, work, and play.
No, very much appreciate that answer. It sounds like you guys have a great sense of community. In some ways, I'm really thinking of Mayberry in the back of my mind. It sounds like you kind of captured that
Yeah,
traditional American dream
yeah,
of a small town. That's
it
absolutely
is. It is.
wonderful.
I had our neighbors come over every now and then. Can I borrow a cup of sugar? I'm not kidding.
You can't
Can I
make that
borrow a
up.
cup? I cannot make it up. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm good. And you get it. Well, that's just the Midwesterners way. And it's like, yeah, no, that's Raymore. We are our neighbors' keeper. We help one another. We do what we can. And so, yeah, we enjoy it.
Well, I love that. I do. Are there any questions that I can answer for you at this time?
No, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you all reaching out. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to kind of talk through some of my ideas and vision for Raymore. And look forward to you all continuing to be a partner with us as the Realtor Association, continuing to sell Raymore, because your success is our success, and I get that. And so as long as we are not, a hindrance to that success, I definitely, encourage and welcome any input. If you see that some of the things that we are doing or I'm doing may do more harm than good, definitely let me know, because, I'm not the arbiter of good ideas. I don't know it all. I can't profess to know it all, because you all are the experts in that space. So you definitely help us make sure that we're putting the best product out there for our community.
Well, we're certainly here to be a resource and an asset to the city. So anytime that you need any information on the market or any
Yeah,
regulatory issues that you're considering, always feel
yeah,
free to reach out. Just very much
awesome.
appreciate your time this afternoon.
Yeah,
Best of
yeah,
luck with your election, and we'll certainly be in touch with you soon.
awesome. Thank you, Mr. Todd.
All
Thanks
right, thank
again.
you. You take care.